Good day, everybody. I'm Rodney Dawson, Curator of Education at the Greensboro History Museum. And upon taking the job, one of the things that I've been asked to do is to connect the history of the past, of course, and how it shaped our city today. And I remember one particular instance where this group asked me to talk about the game of golf in the city of Greensboro, and I did so. But the one name that kept popping up was that of Dr. George Simkins Jr. That was a senior, that was his dad, but he was a dentist turned activist, and I won't have time to go into it now, but he integrated Gillespie Park Golf Course, did a whole bunch, but that case made its way all the way to the Supreme Court. He had to meet with the head of the NAACP legal department, Thurgood Marshall, and he also met with the Attorney General at the time, Bobby Kennedy. And then he later led a case against Moses Cone where the hospital system was integrated. And that case set the precedent to integrate public hospital systems nationwide. And I thought to myself, man, how come I didn't know this growing up? And I went to school here. I matriculated through the K-12 grades here in Guilford County, but it planted a seed in me to learn more. And I found out how Greensboro is really just a beacon of social justice, particularly in the South. There's so many different things that people are aware of. But the reason Greensboro was so attractive, and I believe that so many issues were reckoned with here, is because Greensboro was one of the few southern cities that offered an education for its youth. So people could come here and start a family. We had two primary grade level schools. In 1929, we had our first high school, Dudley High School. We also had our institutions of higher learning. So yay to the Bennett Bells. And if you're not from here, we call it North Carolina A&T State University. If you're from here, we call it A&T or just plain T, Aggie Pride. But we had a strong middle class and a strong strong working class and strong upper and middle class of African Americans. And what made it special is they were in such close proximity. They lived together, they communed together. Now that's partly due to redlining, but it's also because they had built such a strong network. And with this, we have so many people that we can celebrate. And during a celebration recently we had for these hidden heroes in our community, I met a wonderful lady, and she's known throughout the community as the Black historian. Her name is Shirley Simmons. And after meeting her, I said, you got to come on my podcast. And she was willing to do so. She has a collection that's so vast. She's got over 50 years worth of stuff, from the irons, they used to have multiple irons they would heat over the fireplace, to the rotary phones, to the Ebony and Jet magazines. Remember those? Every Black household seemed like they had one on the coffee table in the living room. And if you didn't have it there, it was certainly in the local barbershop or beauty salon. Speaking of beauty salons, look up Mako Beauty College. It operated for 35 years here in Greensboro, I believe from 1934 to 69, had its own dorm rooms, own basketball team, just a wonderful institution. But just check it out, a little bit more history for you. But bringing in Miss Simmons to be a guest on our History Note podcast, I asked her, what do you want to call it? She said, let's call it Past, Present, and Future. I said, where do you want to meet? She said, well, let's go to Mcgirt-Horton Library. That's one of our mutually favorite spots. So we came here. And what better place to talk about the stories of the community at a place that's full of stories and that served as a staple in the community, particularly East Greensboro, Mcgirt-Horton. So a beautiful place for us to come to have a wonderful conversation. So we have the special edition of History Notes called Past, Present, and Future with the Black historian Shirley Simmons. So without further ado, let's go listen to Miss Shirley.
I had this passion for history a long time, but it came greater into my mind after I retired because I had a lot of the history items and things that foreparents used back in the day. We're going to start with the past. This is the past. I know some of you all remember the old ebony magazines when they were big ones. Well, here's one on the table. And I know that you remember, some of you might remember, this spelling book. This spelling book is old, and I mean old, because all the words go in one line.
You have a family, things were passed down to you, and you passed down these narratives and these stories to your kids. Why do you think it's so important to share these narratives? You know, back in the African villages, they used to call us the griots, the storytellers. And their job was to pass this information along. Why has it been so important for you to be a griot in our community?
It's important because it let this younger generation know what our foreparents had, what they didn't have, what they don't know now that needs to come into focus. Now, at this table, we tried to set it up where it would be past, present, and we don't know what the future holds. Only God knows that. But here's some boards of some of the history people that was of the past. Of course, you see the scientist, Charles Drew, because he was one of the ones that worked with the Red Cross. And then there was musicians. Everybody knew Marian Anderson, and they called him Louis, well, his name was Louis Armstrong, but they called him Satchmo. Then we have Eddie Blake, he's passed. Then we have Frederick Douglass, of course. And then we have Martin Luther King, Harriet Tubman. And when you further down the line, you will see the quilt that was made for the traveling of her. On this table is a quilt that my aunt made, like I said, in Jersey. And each pattern she did by hand. And it's the travels that Harriet Tubman did with the Underground Railroad. The quilt was lost for 2 weeks. She kept calling me, asking me, did I get the quilt? But she didn't say, did you get your package? She didn't tell me what it was. I said, no, I ain't got no package. She said, well, I sent it 2 weeks ago. I said, well, I ain't received it. She said, well, I got to track it down because it's something you need. I did not know she was going to make this quilt for me. But she knew I was doing Black history, and she know I like it. I love it. It's my passion. So she made this quilt, and I finally got it. And she labeled each pattern what Harriet Tubman did and the way she traveled with the slaves to get them through. You're welcome to look at it. I have a picture of Harriet Tubman. This is a picture of her getting the slaves through. She's got her gun, because she carried her gun, to get them through. Well, when I was young, we could ride a city bus, but we'd have to sit in the back of the bus. And you didn't have the opportunity to go as a child to a water fountain or even an adult, because back in those days, they had colored and white water fountains and bathrooms. The changes are now, you can go anywhere. The color doesn't matter. Rosa Parks, the mother of the movement, that's what they call her. And this is a book. She came to Greensboro in 1996, and she was at A&T. No, she came in 95, and she was at A&T and she spoke, and I had the pleasure of meeting her. And I asked her would she autograph my book, so she did, and she wrote in here the date and her name. At the same time that day was the 4 young Black men that was at A&T, that was at Woolworths. Well, at the time we were in school, we called him, he has this French name, this Muslim name now, but his name was Ezel Blair. His father was a teacher too. I'm sure Councilman knows who I'm talking about. Well, he signed my book, and this was in 1960. This is when she was jailed, and they had a number on her. And I took a picture, I have a picture of that. And also, I didn't know until recently, I'll say within the last 2 or 3 years, that Claudette Colvin, she was also one of the ones, along with Rosa Parks. I know you all might remember and heard it, and it has come up recently, not long ago, about the lynching of Tillman. I have the book, but I couldn't find it. I have too much. But I did bring the article on him. And then this is where the Black schools was trying to be integrated for grants. And this is the board. But I have the book with Tillman in it, and the funeral and everything, and how he looked, because his mother allowed the casket to be open for people to see how he looked and how they messed him up. Dr. George Simkins, he was my doctor. Now, I'm going to tell you about Dr. Simkins. He was a great man. He was an Army man, I think. No, it was a Blunt that was the Army man. But Dr. Simkins was good. Dr. Simkins, Dr. Blunt, and Dr. Evans, Those 3 doctors were doctors. You didn't have to go from A to B to see what was wrong with you. They could do it all. They know what medications to give you and everything. And they were good doctors. They were dedicated to their job. And they loved their patients. And they was concerned about the patients. I remember at the time, but I don't remember anybody coming to the house. Doctors would come to your house. Am I right or wrong? Now you can't get a doctor in his office hardly. So that's the change that has come about. That's how I came with the title, the past, the present, and hoping for the future, because none of us knows what the future holds. John Lewis. He was a man of dignity, outstanding, and he really fought for civil rights. I have the whole history of him and this book and his life and the travels. Now, you can turn the pages, be very careful, but it's in this notebook. And some of the pictures are graphic because of how they would beat him, and they hit him in the top of the head. And that scar was still there when he died. But it tells the history of him and all the things that he went through.
With Greensboro changing and still changing, in your lifetime, what changes have you seen in Greensboro that have been meaningful?
For one thing, now, even at the present time, Peeler has been torn down and is supposed to be redone. My second school that I attended was Washington Street, but now it's called the Monastery School. That was my second school. My first school was Lutheran, which is Lutheran College. That's religious. But it has been restored and redone. So that is some of the changes as well.
Name some of the changes you've seen as far as the devices that we've used, particularly the technology, the phones, the items, everyday household items. Talk about that.
These are all the old facts. This is the past. Now, some of y'all might know some about these things, some might not. The washboards is what, back in the day, what the elderly people used to wash the clothes, scrub them, and they would be white. The irons, there was no electricity. They used the irons to set on the hearth of a fireplace. They'd have 3 or 4 at one time. One get cold, they put it back on the hearth, put another one, and it'd be hot. The telephones, people didn't have telephones back then either. But the telephones came a little later. Well, when the phones came, then they used the rotary phones, which you had to ring around, and they had 2 and 3 people to talk at one time. It wasn't no just one person. You'd have to wait your turn, is what they would call it, I guess. That was back in the day. A churn. People that had farms, they had cows and pigs and horses. They had a churn, and they would churn the milk to make the butter. Now you go to the store and you buy the buttermilk and the butter. I know about them because I was in the farm. I was on the farm. I was a tomboy. But we have the sausage grinder. How many know about a sausage grinder? Now you go to the store, you don't grind the sausage, you just go ahead and pick up the package. We had a washboard. You know something about the washboard. Wash the clothes, they'll be white as snow. Now the telephones. Well, now we got the modern days, and you got the computers you can talk on, you got the phones, the cell phones, you can call from Greensboro to California to Egypt to Japan and wherever else you want to call. Well, this is the old telephone that had the rotary dials. That's antique for sure. And this is the time, I think, when they had 3-way calls or something, you had to wait or something, been so long. But that's the way those phones worked back in those days. Now, if you lived on the farm, which I did, cows, pigs, chickens, horses, crows, chickens, and everything, we had a churn. And you churn to get the butter. The butter would come to the top, and then you would take and skim it off. My mother did. Put it in a mold. I believe Miss Johnson knows something about that. And you take the mold and turn it upside down. And when you turn it upside down, it'll be a little flower on the top of it. Do any of y'all know anything about that? Okay, but I ain't the only one that knows something about it. Then we had the irons. The old irons that sat on the hearth of the fireplace. They would have 5 or 6 irons. If one got cold, you put it back on there and get up another one to be hot. And these were heavy, and I mean heavy. And back then when they did the ironing, they had starch that they made in a wash pot. And then the clothes would be white as snow. Tide and all this other washing powders can't do nothing what that could do. Because those clothes were purely white by then. And you would hang them on the line, and they would smell good too. Now, when it came to the men, and they worked, they had a shoe lash. This was the shoe lash that they would put the shoes on and fix the soles and the heels of the shoes.
What has it meant to you to see African Americans grow and rise politically and economically, particularly right here in the Gate City?
At the time, I was working at the airport because I was I'd say a chauffeur, carrying people back and forth. I traveled a lot. And then at that time, President Gloria Scott, came through, and I had to take her back to the college. Well, I didn't realize that she was interested in my profession as a chauffeur. So when I went back to work in the next 2 or 3 days, my boss gave me a note that she left for me. And I called her. She wanted me to call her. And I said, Dr. Scott, I received your note. Was there something special you needed? She said, I would like for you to come to Bennett and talk to me. So I did. And when I did, she told me she would like for me to become her chauffeur or companion to travel, to get her from one destination to the other. At that time, I said, really? I was excited. So I did. And in that process of working at Bennett, I met a lot of people. Coretta King and Dr. Maya Angelou. Well, I chauffeured her. And those were some of the dignitaries that I met in the process of working. And at Bennett, Dr. Maya Angelou was on the board of trustees at Bennett College. I met Della Reese. She came through the airport. And someone was saying, that's Della Reese down there on the end. I went going down there right quickly, fast, and in a hurry. And I said, Miss Reese, it's an honor to meet you and a pleasure as well. I said, I watch your series all the time. She said, thank you, darling. I appreciate that. I said, it's an honor to meet you in person. There was a time we'd think we'd see a black man as a president either, would you? You never thought that. You never thought that you would see high officials in the government as well, but it's happening.
Did you ever think that we would see an African American president? And when you saw him, how did it make you feel?
I was happy when Barack Obama came in because that let me know that we are not down anymore, that we are rising. And that's a great thing. When I went, it was very, very cold that day, but I was determined to go and to see. And I did a lot of history on him as well as First Lady Michelle Obama. I have her book. And it's really interesting. He came to Greensboro a few years ago here.
As an African-American woman, a student of history, and you've seen times where we sat at the back of the bus and to now where, we're at the front in many instances. But could you imagine a time where you would have an African-American vice president in Kamala Harris, and then now a Supreme Court justice in Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson?
It's a great thing from where we came from to where we are today. And we are still rising. And if the future holds, we hope to continue to rise. Because it's an advantage, it's a learning experience, and something we need.
I enjoyed this program because one of the things that there's a lot of things that I didn't understand or know about that I didn't learn about in school. Some of it I lived through because of my age. And so I really, really just enjoyed these women, you know, Shirley coming up and presenting and doing what she does. And she has shown us the past, the present, and we all know that we don't have the future yet, but we have the present, which is today. And so I think that the young children, the young kids that's younger than us, that, you know, since we've gotten so old, that we need to artifact this information and put it into some kind of course to teach Black history, the real Black history, to young children. And so I am I would really love to do that. I'm an instructional designer, and I just really love what women do and Black people do in terms of history.
Mcgirt-Horton's history is actually based out of the Claremont Courts right next to the building, and that started in 1986, and it was birthed into a full-fledged City of Greensboro Library in 1989, just across the parking lot from where we are right now. This building itself was just built in 2010, but the history of it is decades old.
So here at McGirt, we're in the unique position of having a sizable portion of the library's African American fiction and nonfiction collection, and we highlight those throughout the years. Of course, our staff is always willing to help people find books that they want related to any number of topics.
We have a bunch of local community members that are banding together to support East Greensboro, whether it's bringing art to Kings Forest Parks or working with the library to have programs like this to just tell the community about the history of East Greensboro. The Greensboro Public Library has partnered with North Carolina A&T as well as the Greensboro History Museum and Greensboro Bound to put on a redlining program that's 4 months of a series talking specifically about redlining in East Greensboro, knowing about how this branch started as a community outcry for a safe place for kids and a safe place for kids to come and learn literacy and them to spend time with their families. That's what this branch was birthed out of. When you came in and told me about this program over a month ago and said that Ms. Simmons was coming to bring some artifacts, not even a third of what she actually had in her house, and again, specifically how it connects to East Greensboro, I was so excited. I wanted to do whatever I could to be able to support a program like that, to make sure that the community knew about it, that the people that were here in the building are representative of the community, so that they could go out and they could find out the information and then tell other community members about it. So I was so excited that Mcgirt-Horton was thought about for something like this, because this is the history of Mcgirt-Horton. So fantastic.
And may I say, a phrase from the Bible: before the end of time, the bottom rail will be on the top and the top rail will be on the bottom. By that means we've been down so long. There was positions we could not hold, but now we are rising and have rose and continue to rise, that we will be on the top before the end of time.